Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you all for joining. My name is Sam Nazari. I'm a sales engineer for Sentient Technology. Today, we're going to be talking about Sentient Ascend and specifically the Sentient Big Book of Ideas. A few of the topics that I'm going to be covering today, we'll do a quick Ascend overview. Want to jump into A/B testing versus AI testing. Talk about the goals of the Big Book. Also talking about the breaking the A/B testing mindset, and also providing you with tips and tricks when setting up experiments in Ascend and best practices. And we will also be reviewing questions today. So I want to talk to you about, for those of you who don't know, about Ascend. Sentient Ascend is the world's first conversion rate optimization solution that's powered by artificial intelligence. It's a breakthrough product that goes way beyond the legacy A/B testing and basic multivariate testing. So if you think about it in the old world, A/B testing, basic multivariate tests are all managed. You have to dive through the statistics. The results are unknown, and the ROI is typically small. With Ascend, using the power of artificial intelligence, we dubbed this term massively multivariate. That's powered by AI, where you can effectively test all of your ideas at once. So you can test a lot more faster by putting in your ideas up front. And you can optimize an entire funnel in a single experiment. It's all automated. We do the math. We promote this notion of always on, where you can continue to leave the experiment on. And the system, the AI, will find the best performing combination based on the behavior of the users to your site, where you will maximize your ROI and maximize your optimization to your site. So let's dive into the goals of the Big Book of Ideas. Why even come up with it? Who is it for? It's really for anyone that's looking to perform conversion rate optimization using Ascend. Anyone that's brand new to testing, up to agencies that run and manage tests for their clients. We provide not only some ideas that have worked really well with some of the clients that we've worked with, but also kind of breaking through that A/B testing mindset and really taking full advantage of the system. Before kind of diving in, recently attended a webinar of an A/B testing provider. And I won't go into too much details about the webinar, but really the high-level concept that they were pushing was the more you test, the more chances you have of finding a winner. So this is a quote from them. That is, if you test 5 or more variations, you can improve your win rate by 75%. We completely agree. The more you test, the more chances you have of finding a winning candidate in your test. And what is kind of their recommendation to be able to set up, manage, run these tests? Their recommendation is to add resources, hire more employees, contract externals, buy more traffic, devote more time to it. And this is putting the burden on you. They're telling you to spend more money that you've already spent a substantial amount on the platform, but now you have to add resources and take more time setting up and deploying experiments. Our recommendation is put the machines to work. Let the AI find the best performing combination of the ideas that you put into the system. And before jumping into some ideas, I want to talk about something we're consistently hearing when folks kind of read about our case studies that are new to Ascend, and that is you are testing. We have case studies where customers of ours have tested 380,000 potential combinations, 10,000 combinations, 50,000, 70,000, all over the map. And what we're hearing from folks that are new to Ascend is that there's no way that I can come up with that many ideas. That's way too many. We don't have the traffic to support it, etc. So what I'd like to take the time to do is kind of break that down. We'll take a look at what a search space of a little over 3,000 combinations looks like when you're setting up your test. So instead of thinking about when you're setting up a test A versus B, let's think about it in terms of the web page and then breaking that web page down into the different elements that you want to test and then creating individual variations for those elements. So if we take a look at this example product detail page, we have 5 elements on the page. We have the button color, the button copy, the product image size, the product text size, the rewards messaging. And then we have one value for the original content, the control, and we've created 4 variations for each element. So if we take a look at that, 5 elements, 5 variations per element, multiplying that up is 3,125 combinations. And when you hear that search space of over 3,000 combinations, it can be pretty overwhelming. But if you break it down, it adds up pretty quickly as you start adding more variations for each element on the page. And if you visualize kind of those elements changing on the page and what that looks like, for example, the button color, the button copy, the image size, text size, rewards messaging, you can QA and preview these in the system before you actually deploy your experiment, so you can make sure everything meets branding guidelines, etc. And you'll be able to view it as one page as you're previewing it in the system. So let's dive into configuring an experiment in Ascend and talk through some of these best practices. So now you should be seeing the Ascend dashboard, and this is not, I'm not trying to do a product demo, I'm just trying to talk through some best practices when you are setting up a test in Ascend, because we hear that a lot of times is when folks dive in, they want to know where to begin, how to think about setting up the test. And because you can test an entire funnel in an Ascend experiment, our recommendation, best practice, is to start with the macro conversion goals. So what action do you want the user to take on your site? In this example, I have a t-shirt site, metropolclothing.com, and my goal for this site is to increase users making a purchase and checking out on the site. So that conversion goal is counted when a user loads the thank you page. And then working backwards from that conversion goal and looking at each individual funnel pages. So I've added the cart page, the product page, the category page, and then the home page. So I want to test the entire funnel for when the user comes to the site, goes through the entire funnel, and then checks out on the site. And when you're setting up variations for each of the pages, this is really where we've seen folks kind of, initially they would go into the system, even agencies that have been in this industry for years would go into the system and set up 3 or 4 variations for one element. And that's really not making the best use of the platform. So instead of thinking about it A versus B or A, B, C, D, again, think about it in terms of the different elements on the page. So the product image, the product name, the rewards messaging, the price, the call to action, and then break that down. And very easily, you can select an element, provide the name, save it, and then create variations for that element. So I'll just add this here. And then when you do that, now you start thinking about, okay, what do you want to change about this specific element? If it's the text color, the text size, content, background color, background image, testing, hiding, or removing elements to reduce clutter on the page, which has worked really well, especially on product detail pages where we've seen customers test removing a product recommendation banner at the top and on the side that kind of distracts the user from the actual call to action or the action they want the user to take on the site. And also you can add your own custom JavaScript, jQuery, CSS, HTML, and here is at the point where you define what you want to change, and then going in and start adding values, so creating those variations, which you can easily do by providing the hex values, for the colors for your branding guidelines, etc., and then testing those. And you can do those. You can add multiple ones at a time. And then you'll be able to preview all of those, the changes that you add to the system, the text, and you can go and start testing the different combinations. So you can do your QA up front directly in the editor, but also cycling through all of the different combinations that you've added to the system to make sure everything meets branding guidelines before you deploy your experiments. And a best practice is to use the preview mode to make sure that if there is text that wraps or anything like that, anything that doesn't look the way exactly the way you want it to, when elements and variations are combined, you can actually go back in the system and edit those before you deploy your experiment. And so you'll do that for every single page within your experiment. And once you've defined, if you'd like to define a specific audience that meets a certain criteria to enter into the experiment, you can. But effectively, that's at a high level how to think about setting up the funnel as well as the variations for each page. If there are any questions, happy to take them at this time. Well, so it looks like we have a couple questions here. The first one is, how long does it take to integrate Ascend? It's very similar to client-side testing solutions. It involves deploying a snippet. It's a one-line JavaScript snippet that goes in the head of the pages that you want to test as high up as possible for optimal performance. So, I mean, if you have access to placing a snippet, it can be within a couple minutes of setting that up. What is the largest number of ideas you can test at once is the next question. So that's a great question. And what we like to do is, and we'll be adding this calculator into the system, but effectively it depends on the conversion rate as well as the traffic that's coming to the site. So if we take a look at, for example, if you wanted to test the example that we had of 5 elements and 5 variations per element, that's a little over 3,000 potential combinations. That is, we would recommend having a site that has at least 2,500 conversion events in a given time. So if you had, let's say, a website that had about 100,000 unique visitors per 30-day period and 2.5% conversion rate, it's safe to say you could get through 3 to 4 generations with Ascend, where you start to see some winners of that search space emerge. Looks like we got a question about how does Ascend impact the site speed? Great question. So the snippet is synchronous. We recommend placing it as high up as possible so that it can make the call to our cloud. And then our cloud sends back the information on what test group is this user in and what variations are we displaying for this specific test group. And it's anywhere from 100 to 150 milliseconds, but we can optimize that even further. By default, we inject the variations using a JavaScript library known as jQuery. If we use raw JavaScript, we can cut that in half. The other question is, how much traffic do I need to test the 3,000 plus combinations? Again, if let's say you want to run a test for 30 days, if you have that 100,000 unique visitors, 2,500 conversion events in that given time, you know, you could definitely run at least 3, 4, 5 generations in that window. If there's less conversion events in, let's say, a 30-day window, you could still test that 3,000. It might take a little bit longer, perhaps 45 days or 60 days. And then we have another question of what kind of AI does Ascend use? That's a great question. We use a branch of artificial intelligence known as evolutionary algorithms. And in most cases, the way that the system works, and this depends on the traffic and the number of values you add to the system, but when you deploy an experiment, what the system does is it, in most cases, tests all of the variations and the values that you put into the system individually. And the system finds what's working well and what's not working well very quickly. So it's pruning poor performers, and then it's continuing to drive traffic to the remaining candidates' page variations individually. And it's seeing what's working well. And when it sees a degree of separation, those top performers, the two top performers in that candidate pool, become parents of the next generation. So evolutionary algorithms mimics the principles of natural selection, finds parents in that first generation, and then evolves. And then what it does is it starts breeding and combining those top performers together and generates a new pool of candidates. And now it's testing variations in combination with each other. And it does the same thing again, where it prunes poor performers, exploits top performers, and then evolves to the next or third generation. And it does the same thing again. And then there's this notion of mutation, where individual variations that were tested by themselves that didn't perform well are given a chance at survival. So effectively, they're given a chance to be brought back in to be tested with the top performers to see if there's a combinatory effect that could lead to those working really well. And we've seen a number of cases where that's happened. We have a client that's a mobile phone reseller that tested a salmon-colored button by itself, and it didn't perform well on its own, but when it was tested in combination with a very large font that was bolded, a different headline, and a variation to an image swap effectively on the page, it was one of the top 3 performers of that experiment. And then someone asked, how does Ascend work across mobile and desktop? Does the data from each platform help the AI on the other? Great question. So it depends on how you'd like to run your experiment. So you can run an experiment where you're including all traffic, whether it's desktop or mobile. We do have audiences where you can define the certain set of criteria on who you'd like to enter into an experiment. And one of those options is if you want to target by device. So if you want to run an experiment that's focused on desktop only, the system will optimize for those users. And then you can run a separate experiment in parallel where you define an audience for mobile users only. And if you have enough traffic for that, to run those 2 tests in parallel, highly recommend optimizing directly for each platform. It looks like we got another question that came in. Does Ascend A/B test your top performing candidate? Yes, absolutely. We can definitely configure it to test the top performer or top performers. One of our clients ran an experiment where they had the 380,000 potential combinations. They had around a 40-ish% lift in the best performer from control, but they had 3 or 4 top performers that were in the same range. So the error bars were overlapping, and they wanted to run an ABCD test. Absolutely, we can run that in our platform where we drive traffic to those top performers to see if we can see a degree of separation to see which one performs the best. Someone asked, can you define custom audiences, for example, registered users? Absolutely, and I can actually show that quickly here. Where you go to define audiences, there's you can effectively add rules on literally the following. So targeting based on IP address or device or platform, query string parameter, location, refer URL, cookie value, JavaScript. So for example, if registered users have a certain cookie value, you could define that here and what that value is. And then effectively include those folks into the experiment, run a parallel experiment for unknown or unregistered users, and then optimize for those users as well. There's also another way you could do it using custom JavaScript to identify the known versus unknown users. Great. I'm happy to answer any more questions today. The big book is available. Feel free to reach out to us If you'd like a copy, it's about 20 pages of ideas that we've seen work really well, and it kind of also helps you expand the thought to AI testing, where you can test a lot more and are not limited in terms of that. So if anyone would like a copy of that, definitely reach out to us, or if you'd like a custom demonstration of the product, we're happy to do that as well. Awesome. So there are no, I think there's another question that came in. How much does Ascend cost? We're happy to chat with you about that. Reach out to us. We'll need a little bit of information from you, and then we can provide you with pricing on Ascend. Awesome. Again, thank you so much for joining today. Looking forward to chatting with you guys if you have any additional questions. Have a great day.